the last 10 years, it was a total of 26 jobs since I was 15 years old. And things really became real to me when I heard a story that this guy had just gone to London with a Spetsnaz shotgun and robbed some coke dealers. And because of my involvement in that, I believed in the devil full well before I believed in the light. I thought we had it all sewn away and summed up as humans, and I thought we found out there was no point to anything, because I can live with that. I can't live with if there's meaning. Pretty much partying by myself, on weed, on coke, on booze, watching films, playing video games, watching porn, inviting women around. That split second in falling, you know your life flashes before your eyes or something, my dad's gonna find me dead. Just kill yourself, Tom. The amount of pain you cause in people's lives. There you go. You got a rope, you got a light fitting. Try something. Try to take your life. Were you a coward? I now, and anyone who knows that they know they are God's child, can come to God in the fullest of confidence in what Jesus has done, no matter what disaster and mess you've made of your life, and receive the gospel again.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Extrospective podcast with your host, Zach Villeneuve-Snell. Today, I'm joined by Tom Bryant, and as you can probably tell, we're recording in person. This is all a little bit different, a little bit new to me. A lot has changed in my life in the last few months since I last recorded the podcast, and yeah, I'll get into that potentially in a future episode. But today, I'm sat down with my current housemate, moved in with a bunch of guys from church in the last few months here in Bournemouth, and I thought it would be a fantastic idea to get to know Tom a little bit more in podcast format. Of course, when you're getting to know someone and getting to know into a group quite recently, you're going for coffee, you're trying to work people out. But I think with Tom, he has a particularly fascinating story to tell. He has a really cracking testimony. I think it could be really interesting to dive into. So I wanted to save the conversation for now and then see how we get on. How are you feeling?
It's good to be here. I hope I'm all mic'd up well. I'm not sure we did the tests and everything, but I'm sure that's all good. And it's just cool to be on a podcast.
And so, to be honest, let's wind all the way back. And the question I've often asked many of the guests is, what were you like as a child? Describe yourself as a child.
Immediately, my mind goes to what my mother said I was like as a child. She said I was very independent. I went through a stage when I was younger when I would cling to my parents, but then I just became very independent. And the dynamic changed between me and my sister, where I think she was the more independent one who became dependent, and for me it was reverse of that. I was very dependent, and then I kind of did my own thing, wanted to go out and be with my friends from a very young age. Very thankful to have grown up and been encouraged to go out and about, to knock on the neighbour's door, to cycle around, because I think I just missed the generation where that was not massively encouraged, and there wasn't really an example set for that. I was very impulsive, very wanting to have fun, wanting to be with the gang, my group of friends, and yeah, just getting in trouble, really, honestly, all the time, in a million and one different ways. I used to climb trees. I was very boisterous, adventurous, and yeah, always kind of scheming with friends about all kinds of things that we could get up to, from money making to just mischief, like all kinds of things.
Have you ever reflected on the reasons why, either from like social influences or family or like your personal temperament, why you were particularly scheming? And obviously you said you were dependent, but then you had your kind of journey out into doing stuff with your mates. Have you ever thought about like why that was, and obviously why that wasn't for other people, you know, in contrast?
Obviously I can't speak for others, but for me, I just wanted to be where I was having fun, and a lot of the time that looked like going out and about, and I think the people who were older around me, that weren't too older, that's what they were doing. So it was very easy just to follow that crowd and to fit into that, and a lot of that rubbed off on me.
The question I want to ask is the extent to which there were authority figures in your life when you were a kid versus were there particular role models that you gravitate towards, and because obviously a lot of this kind of rebellion often is against authority is quite a common theme you see with young people when they kind of go from being children into adolescence. So what was that like for you?
So as far as are figures of authority that should have been in my life. So my dad left my home when I was, I think, 10 years old. So when I was 10 onwards, there was definitely a lack of an older father figure in my life to look to and example my life around. And I'm being brought into a group of older guys. They were really who I looked up to. Again, they actually matched my character in a major way. Although looking back, again, whether or not that was imprinted on me, from a young age I was smoking and drinking in parks and doing those sorts of things.
How old were you when you started doing that?
Probably about 13 years old. So I've probably smoked weed when I was 13 and drank when I was more like 16 years old and onwards. And then that would have been in parks and in people's homes who hosted house parties and whatever. And what really had the effect from a young age is obviously smoking weed. That was something that really fueled one, a necessity in me, like let's make money from this, let's make money for this, and then crime kind of came into that.
So that was in from like skate community, and there being older figures within that just pulled you into this lifestyle that then once you're in that lifestyle, you're almost trapped by it a little bit, because it's not only the drugs or the alcohol, but it's also, you know, if you're going to remove yourself from the drugs and alcohol, you're also removing yourself from your entire identity and people that you've molded yourself of and around, I suppose.
I had no other model, and it seemed really alien to me when I met people my age, probably who would have been had a similar experience to you, who were really achieving in things like athletics and in school, and I was going, well, actually, do you know, really looking back, I can see a part of myself that was very jealous that they're living what I would have thought was a normal life, but I wasn't necessarily jealous to the point of wanting to change. I just kind of thought, this is my lot, and parts of it I enjoy, part of it I don't, and I couldn't model my life after them because I didn't have the same mindset, examples from young. I didn't have that discipline in my life, and as well as other things. You know, my dad left when I was 10, but he was very much alienated from doing family life and being a father from when I was born.
What are you thinking and feeling when you're kind of in the ages of, like the kind of early teenagehood, when I suppose you are going to school, although I'd imagine you're probably bunking off sometimes and, you know, doing all this kind of petty crime and whatnot. And to be honest, I can think back to my own school experience, and I can think of the characters that might have resembled some of the traits and some of the things that you're thinking now. And you can kind of think back to just the fact that the groups form in school, and you never really have that cross-group like conversations. You know, you have the guy that's kind of doing that kind of thing. You have like the cool group, you know, the kind of popular people. Sure. You have the nerds. You have the people that kind of find themselves in between. I just find it interesting that like all of this could be going on, and yet the quote-unquote normal kids with maybe more stable examples of family structures or financial provision or whatever, there's never that like cross, almost like cultural discussion. Like as a 13 or 14-year-old, you go through school and you kind of, you're so egocentric, you think people are like you because you surround yourself with people that are like you, and you kind of put these people off to the side. But those people, you don't appreciate the family or like context in which they're coming into school from, I guess. So is that something you ever... No, yeah.
You're definitely not that thoughtful. Yeah. For me as well, I've heard that it's a trait of an addict, it's a kind of an addict behavior, to have multiple friendship groups. So I had the people that I stuck to like glue, and I had the people that I was glue for. I had friendship groups of people I was trying to get into that I was kind of on the outskirts of, and I was kind of fine with that because, you know, whatever. But I had multiple friendship groups, and it was a way for me to explore different identities. Even looking back, just in this moment, I can see that, and it was a way for me to float away from situations when they got too serious or too involved or too close. There's a myriad of all kinds of different psychological things going on there, getting bored of people and just wanting to see different faces, make new friends, which I really enjoyed doing. And something also in me desperately kind of trying to get what goes along with the identity thing, to get what I should be doing. I know what I have experienced and what I enjoyed and what I didn't want to do. And there was nothing in my mind of really, this is what I should do. That was ethereal. That was not a thing that was in my mind at all. I couldn't hold that. But yeah, multiple friendship groups, and yeah, I mean, I moved after my parents' divorce. We moved to Bournemouth from High Wycombe. So,
when was that? When you were 10?
That was when I was 10, 11, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me rocked my boat. Even at a young age, it's crazy. Your feet really want to get rooted at a young age and know that you're not moving and the things around you.
There's some element of like a desire just for safety and comfort, right?
And familiarity and community naturally built into us.
Yeah, I remember having conversations with you in the past about that stability, or that, obviously that desire for safety and comfort. Just the fact that even from moving down to Bournemouth, you kind of bounced around quite a lot, and that was something that you kind of struggled with because you want to find somewhere to call home. Especially as a child developing, you want that familiarity.
Yeah.
I know for me, I'm like very grateful for the fact that, and almost to the other end of extreme, my parents are still living in the house. I was actually there today for lunchtime, my dad, in the same house as I grew up in when I was like 5 months old, 5 years old, 15 years old. It's the same house.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting, there's like vastly different experiences. And to be honest, for me as well, there's an element of like, a limiting belief that I've had to work with in terms of where I would like to settle and travelling and seeing the world, because I'm almost too familiar and too comfortable with Bournemouth. So obviously you have like the other end of the spectrum of, I guess, finding it difficult to stay in one place for longer than a few months or whatever. So what was that like when you were growing up, that kind of uncertainty really as to what's going to be happening the next month?
There was so much fear in my house around finances, and because it's a single mother raising 2 children, and between, landlords who put insane pressure on my mum. So after the divorce, we moved here, and my parents sold our family home in Hazelmere. That money got split somewhere that I'm not fully sure how it was split, but that money got used solely on rent for the next 10 years. And it had to be because my mum was not earning enough doing a care job. And then she is emotionally, mentally drained from that job and trying to provide and whatever. While me and my sister are being put through school at her laying down her life in that way. And there's lots of things that I don't know the fullness of between my mum and my sister, that to this day there's a soft spot in I don't go near that, it's a sensitive spot. And thankfully for me, I didn't see a lot of what my mum was going through in that time. I was still quite young, just boisterous, not paying attention, not really awake to life, and probably wanting, well, I actually did put myself more to sleep when it came to the drugs and blah, 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 all the things that I was sinking myself into, probably just to stop my conscious awareness of what's going on at home. The way my mum suffered for 10 years, putting us through school and all those things, it was horrible to see. Abusive partners and abusive landlords really as well. So that, it also fueled a lot of hate in me, and all the time we're always packing boxes, and it's exhausting moving. It's so exhausting moving. I actually have a list of, I have to, because some of the jobs I've applied for in the past, they've needed 10 years of my addresses for like security clearance or something like that. And going through it, horrible. Seriously, I wasn't necessarily aware that I had moved that much in my life. So my mum gave me a list of the addresses we've moved from.
I suppose it's not so much a logistical thing. It's also like the emotional weight of when you're just making sense of that and writing it down, right? It's like, oh my goodness, like,
Yeah.
and you're thinking back to the memories that you have at each place as well, I guess.
I look at the address, I remember it, and then some things come back, you know. It's the same with my work history that I wrote down maybe a year ago. In the last 10 years, it was 26 jobs since I was 15 years old. And then with all of them, it's like, yeah, I know what happened here,
26 jobs in 10 years.
26 jobs in 10 years.
That's definitely clip that.
That's it, yeah. 26 jobs in 10 years, and it was all really down to the lifestyle I was living, discontentment with life, wondering, why am I even doing what I'm doing? This is all pointless, just depression. And massively feeling like not part of the system, this hasn't worked for me at all. I got a bad start, you know, so I'm unplugging completely.
I want to ask and touch on something you mentioned about 5-10 minutes ago, when it comes to I guess the stress that your mum was under, that you were perhaps not fully aware of, or perhaps not fully wanting to be aware of, and using school and then the community and the drugs and alcohol as an escapism from that environment. Have you done much reflecting back on, like, just from your mum's perspective, like from your mum's perspective during this time? Because I think it's obviously one of those things that as we grow older, we start to see our parents for, you know, as humans, as whole people, and you can see the positive elements to them and the negative elements to them. But hopefully you also grow in an appreciation of they did the best job that they could given the circumstances and the things they had ahead of them. But also then, like, also feeling bad for maybe some of the stuff that you did now that you're an adult and you're realising, oh wow, that must have been really challenging. Yeah, so right. Do you ever think about from your mum's perspective during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I had plenty of time to reflect when stuff really hit the fan. When she kicked me out when I was 18 or 19. So earlier on today, I should say, I was actually trying to go through, when I was at volunteering, where I volunteer, I was going through some things, and I'd finished doing what I'm doing, and I was writing a list. And I'd started to realise I have amnesia about a lot of this. And it's because of just how much I have abused drugs. And probably, again, suppressing it consciously. I think the first time I was made homeless was when I was 19 years old. And that was because I drove my mum to the absolute limit.
What was that? That's 6 years ago.
6 years ago, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I had plenty of time to look back when I finally realised I got a wake-up call, the first wake-up call. And yeah, my heart absolutely broke for my mum because of the amount of patience she had for me and love that she showed me, and how I didn't appreciate it whatsoever, but essentially just spat in her face. So exhausted and drained from work and trying to give me the best future possible, but there is no one in the house to control me. How could she? Absolutely wiped. And yeah, so it's one of the reasons why I'm so close to my mum today, is because the love I have for my mother now exists, number one, and is I can't ever repay her, and even more so coming to know the Lord, which actually allowed me to have a bank account of love for her, which isn't the love of a son for a mum. You look after me and you're my place of refuge or anything like that. It's something far more almost pastoral. It's different now.
There's a couple of things that I want to kind of respond with and kind of put back to you. One of the things, both relating to kind of parenthood, I guess, in different ways. The first is how, at least the way that I've formulated it and understood in my mind, and I'm wondering whether it's just anecdotal and just me, or whether it also applies to other people. But I think one of the major things that I believe is a marker for, as a boy is transitioning to a man, is how the dynamic and relationship changes between him and his mother. And so something that I recognise is that, let's say there's a neutral crisis or challenging thing that both people are going through or are observing happen within family or within any context. Typically speaking, as a boy, my mum would comfort me, and it's gradually transitioned in the last few years for me to when that thing occurs, it's now me putting my arm around her.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting, and I just wonder if that's something you've also kind of experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful thing to reflect on. It really is. But I remember the day that I really saw my mum's emotional breakdown financially, and what are we going to do? This was just before we moved out of a friend of hers, because we'd moved out of a place we couldn't afford, to go and move to a trailer park that we were only there for a few weeks. And but I remember her sitting on the bed and me coming into the room, and yeah, she absolutely broke down. And I remember her saying that she doesn't know what to do, and the tears were just flowing. And I remember, how old was I then? I must have been, I think I was like 16, 17. So there was still plenty more nonsense of me to come. But that was the moment when I was like, my dad isn't around. My dad isn't around. And that picture I'm seeing in front of me and my mother breaking down and there's no one to comfort her isn't right. And I think that was the first time that I knew I had to step into that in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time I would not have identified myself as I'm a man. So that was a really scary kind of like, I need to go and comfort my mum moment for me. And yeah, it's a beautiful memory I've got, but only in light of where we are now. I know so many people are on that process and they're still in a very painful place. But that is why I'm thankful for my life, because it, I hope, to someone is a vision of hope. Mm-hmm. That things do change.
We do live in a generation where, unfortunately, mother or father, there's a lot of brokenness, there's a lot of hurt surrounding the family dynamic, and you know we're all sinful, we've all fallen short, and
yeah.
You know, we live in a culture which is not exactly helpful for any of this either. The question really was quite broad in terms of your perspectives on the necessity and importance of a father, given your experience of potentially not having that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I'm really a victim of issues being generational. My dad is a victim of a distant father. I'm a victim of an absence of a father. His heart was there in a major way, but the action wasn't, and definitely some scheme of the devil, a means to an end, to have a generation on generation on generation, people who are alienated from the idea of fatherhood, from what it means to be a father, to have a father, and that relationship is a very strange one, even where it exists. I see a lot of people with their dads, and it's they have a relationship. Their dad was around, but even still, there's something that doesn't look like the picture I know now is that beautiful picture of who I call my Heavenly Father. And there's so many. It's multi-dimensional, isn't it? Why men act the way they act and feel the way they feel, and everything that makes a man should want to fight against that. And I think unfortunately the only cure is the gospel. That's the only the way that I see forward. And people who know the love and the heart of the Heavenly Father and actually walk that out in an exemplary way.
There's a gravitation towards extreme archetypes of what it means to be a man culturally, almost in backlash and response to the extreme archetypes of what it means to be a man in the other direction that's been pushed by culture in the last sort of 50 years. And we can see this polarity forming, and actually you can take elements of each end of the spectrum when it comes to being like really nice, passive and soft versus being really like overly domineering and like materialistic, the kind of Andrew Tate kind of types. It's like, well, that's a message that is filling a gap, but that's clearly a sinful, degenerate message as well.
Yeah.
And there's the gap that's there. The gap is the gospel, and ultimately, in our understanding, the love of the Father and the kind of the gospel perfectly upholds all of these elements, kind of as a kind of a central thing. And I do want to get onto that part of your story, but I think there's probably a couple of loose ends that would be helpful to tie in, to tie up. And I guess one of the questions really is, you said you were smoking weed from 13 and drink alcohol from 16, and you were homeless at 19. And obviously that's very like top level kind of description of some of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
But in terms of your experience with drugs and being homeless and that whole world, I don't know, just like to the extent that you feel comfortable to, I'd love to know more about that, because I think as with anything that we experience and often also suppress in our memory, bringing these things to the surface, not only for ourselves but also the listeners, just trying to make sense of the reasons for some of the behaviours and looking back on some of the patterns, and just generally like unpicking obviously the fact that you were there and now you're here. I think that's quite a significant part of the testimony. So I'll let you take that how you want to.
Thank you. See, it's incredible, because I've never really had an opportunity to sit down like this and talk about it, which even going through some of the 12 steps and being in the rooms and doing those things, you do break down your past to some extent. And
like Alcoholics Anonymous kind of stuff.
You get a sponsor and you start to walk through some of the steps, and a lot of it brings up your past. And from young, I'm doing kind of the basic, what I would consider basic stoner entry-level experimenting with drugs and misdemeanors, and that's marijuana, that's petty theft, that's like running from the police on a ped through the park or something. It's like whatever, they find you, they just give you a slap on the wrist and they tell you stop being a nuisance, right? They went to a new level for me when I was introduced to a group of my stepbrother's friends who were really into party lifestyle and car meetups and those sorts of things. So again, I'm kind of tagging along now with my stepbrother. He's older than me.
What age?
I think I'm 20, because it would have been after my first time being homeless, and obviously that was at 19, so it makes sense that I'd be 20. And yeah, I'm buddying alongside my stepbrother's older than me, and I'm kind of following in his footsteps a little bit with what he's doing. And there's one or two incidences with the police as well that were very exciting for me, especially like getting away with some things. You don't, you get caught and you've got a wake-up call. You don't get caught and it's like, this is life on the knife edge, And I'm not even really being mindful of the fact of what I'm doing. Again, to me, I'm whisked away with the crowd, and I'm really just trying to find the next motive, the next bit of fun, the next mission, whatever it is.
Is this also in a search for identity, that you're kind of latching to this lifestyle and these people, and you don't really know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, until I knew the Lord, I didn't know myself. So, and that's still a journey I'm on with Him. And I think it's also important to say, so while I'm doing this, while I'm growing up and I've got all this kind of chaotic behavior, and I'm not really at all excelling in school, I'm mediocre at best. I didn't like the system, I didn't like school, what are grades? I was really disconnected from that. And the reason for that was probably, one, the drugs, two, my involvement in seeking spiritually. And I did those things, again, in a part-time way. So I'm seeking something.
Truth. Not even truth.
Yes, truth, but in a mix of also, really, I almost don't want to say truth, because I know my own heart well enough to know that I'm sure there's other things at play there. But really it was, why am I here? Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? So I'm looking for truth in those ways. And And unfortunately, the spiritual ways that I got involved in do something that keep you going around the revolving door for ages. You have spiritual experience, you come back to normality. Spiritual experience, back to normality. You get sent on a big high and you come back to a fat reality that kind of sucks. And it leaves you kind of more hopeless because it expands your consciousness and you start to have experienced another dimension of life. And still you have no anchor. You have nothing.
This is the combination of drug use with spirituality?
Yeah, yeah.
Like a hallucinogenic kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I touched hallucinogenics few and far between. And that was actually later on in life. But it was more so listening to particular spiritual gurus, doing transcendental meditation, and attempting things that I didn't really understand what I was playing with. And yeah, some of that stuff was occult because it fascinated me. There's something obviously the most attractive thing there was this ability, these are powers, these are things that people are asleep to. I've always believed that I think it's the truth. When you believe in the devil and the devil is your daddy, you keep it a secret. When the Heavenly Father is your papa, you tell everyone, right? But when the devil is your daddy, you keep it a secret. Witches, warlocks, etc., etc. They don't want people to come to the source of power they have. There's all kinds of things that go on that I think I've only been exposed to a little bit of it, but that would make like your average Joe Bloggs off the street stomach curdle. And because of my involvement in that, I believed in the devil full well before I believed in the light. So I saw the state of the world. Because of the things I was doing, I was having an awakening in my conscience, in my consciousness. Not my conscience at all, but in my consciousness, yes.
But in the same way as some people, even without doing any of this kind of stuff, can look at systems and structures and the way the world operates and some of the corruption and politics and whatnot, you can still look at those things as an onlooker and get quite disheartened or quite skeptical or quite conspiratorial about a lot of stuff, I suppose, about the makeup and structure of society. When you start to question things, at least that was definitely my experience growing through school, is you begin to pick apart the structures that you've taken for granted, realise there are only people here, and realise ulterior motives and agendas and things at hand.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's part of the perspective. And you've also got an element of lack of clear role models or figures to look up to, clearly understanding that things aren't what you thought you were blissfully as like an 8-year-old when you don't know any better, and you're growing into this, you're doing all the kind of drug stuff, and it's like, what on earth is this? Like, and I've spoken to you briefly in the past about some of the almost like existentialism that you kind of came to with all of this. Which for me is like the logical conclusion of this if you don't have Christ.
Yeah.
It's like, what is any of this for if all of this is just some hoo-ha and some political play and we're just puppets, you know?
So I knew at a young age I knew my own heart. And I knew my own heart because I had insight into someone else's heart. And that person was my dad. So from a young age, when I said I was given an insight into why my dad had an affair, it was because he had come to a place in his life where he was doing things he thought would bring him purpose and fulfillment and meaning. The family life, alongside the career he had poured himself into, and what was made clear to me was that those things didn't fulfill him. He was alienated from what he thought he would find so much in, purpose, meaning, all these things. Aside from Christ, even in those things, clearly people struggle. Like it doesn't have any natural intrinsic meaning to it. If up can be down and down can be up, why do I care about my family? Everything starts to fall apart. So the insight I was given into why he left and why things had happened rubbed off on me to start to look at things from a different lens. And I didn't trust the system I was in, probably not coming from not trusting the home I was in. Somehow my awareness of all these things is growing, but also my life is shrinking in on itself at the same time. Inwardly, I'm living in my own head all the time, suspicious of everyone. People are threats, or I can use them.
Do you think the smoking weed from 13 plays into that? Because paranoia, especially in adolescence, paranoia is quite a prevalent symptom of some of that.
Yes, absolutely, and probably because of the petty crime and where I had experienced some stuff spiritually. So it isn't necessarily true or founded in any reality, but it was a subjective experience that made me suspicious of people I would meet, because where did they come from, and who are they, and what's their intentions and whatever. As well as being paranoid that my past, even when I was young, was catching up to me. So where do I know you from? Kind of a attitude I had a lot. And I see it a lot in the culture today of young men. You know, da-da-da. How do you know da-da-da? Why are we suddenly chums?
Like the posture is always skeptical, I guess.
Yeah, it just absolutely, I didn't trust anyone. It was dog eat dog, cat scratch cat. I'm in it for myself. I had no love in my heart for anyone else. I'm in it for myself. So I was involved in that crowd, and that led to me actually finding another friend who was a kind of a petty shotter in High Wycombe. He sold weed, and he kind of needed transport. And my symbiotic relationship with him is, I drive you around, you give me free weed. And where that also was really appealing to me, obviously, is as far as as far as young women are potentially drawn into that, and the power behind that, and all the other dynamics, and you put on this facade of hardness and whatever.
You know, it's one of the things that I hear Jordan Peterson talk about, which is that young men and young women have all their different faults because of their naivety. But one of the key things is that young women, by nature of being young and naive, find it difficult to distinguish between the confidence and the bravado and the competence that isn't there to back it up. And obviously they learn through experience, and likewise with young men, you know, they have plenty of mistakes in terms of ill perceptions and getting drawn into toxic things with women and vice versa. But particularly with that, the whole bad boy demeanour of being cool and edgy and having some level of power and social status naturally to a young woman who maybe is naive and doesn't know any better, or maybe even has their own issues at home or whatever, that then is gravitated towards that male figure. I guess that almost that father figure that, you know, if we can talk about these terms, I guess that's speaking to that kind of dynamic that you were then stepping into.
Which happened, and it was terrifying, because I wasn't used to the attention. And yeah, out of my depth fully, trying to be someone that I'm not, and because of that, not becoming who I'm meant to be. And what me and this guy ended up doing was selling, using, and partying down in my dad's shed. That was a work shed that I turned into a lad cave, just an absolute place of debaucherous drug using and partying, and I really put my stepfamily through hell. During that time I was stealing money to make money that I, in my mind, was like, I'll pay them back. Never did. And I think well, again, because I don't know too much, it's whatever, but it was a significant amount of money I ended up stealing, putting into what was also my own pleasure seeking at the time, but a lot of it went into buying drugs to sell that actually just ended up getting used. And I was living, during this time, my family life really started to break down. So 19, homeless, ended up moving in with my auntie. She couldn't deal with me, ended up kicking me out to my dad's. That relationship, the whole dynamic of living with my step family, broke down very quickly. They could not get a handle on me. And I'd really tried to walk the straight and narrow, as far as I understood what that meant, getting a job. I had 2 apprenticeships that people would have killed for. I won't name.
What?
Say again.
In what?
In engineering.
Okay.
I won't name the name of the companies, but they were all expenses paid. Like, they were incredible. The pay was insane for an apprentice, and I basically smoked, sniffed, and drank it up the wall in this shed, partying, thinking I can make a business out of selling, and I'm doing a little bit of whatever, but I'm only just scraping back what I'm spending, and then I almost died in that shed, and that was a bit of a wake-up call. So the first time I think that I really recognised that there's someone looking out for me. So at this time, even though I'm doing spirituality and all these things, I'm very arrogant, and I remember one night becoming compos mentis with my friend on the kind of different sofas we had down this shed, and we were just out of our heads talking craziness. And I remember I said something, but what he said stuck with me. He said, "Do you not think there are things we can't explain?" Which resonated with everything I was experiencing, from addiction to my experiencing things spiritually. But I couldn't actually admit it to myself. I had to wait till he said it. So I had said something really arrogant, clearly, and very empirically minded.
Like cynical as well, right?
Probably cynical. And he just challenged me. Do you not think there are things we can't explain? And I was just like, damn, that hit somewhere in me. That actually resonates. That's reality for me. But I can't face that. I need to know that we know everything.
Is that like a pride?
No, it was more fear. It was more, I thought we had it all sewn away and summed up as humans. And I thought we found out there was no point to anything. Because I can live with that. I can't live with if there's meaning.
Yeah, maybe Nietzsche was right. God's dead. Let's just pleasure it up and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if there's more to this, then... So I was one night after partying and pretty much partying by myself, just getting caked up, right? On weed, on coke, on booze, watching films, playing video games, watching porn, inviting women round, bad stuff. I fainted, and it was more or less done up, this shed, but it was still a work shed. It still had a metal vise on a workbench, and I remember waking up, and I actually remember the fall. I remember the fall, and I remember waking up. I think I remember the fall more than I remember waking up. And I realized when I was falling, I'm going to hit the vise. And then I remember waking up and realizing I hadn't hit the vise. I'm awake, I'm alive, okay. And that was big time to like sit upright and just stare at the floor for however long I need to stare at the floor and process the situation. Because it's almost like that split second in falling, you know, your life flashes before your eyes or something, but all the thoughts in my head, my dad's going to find me dead, basically was what was in my mind. My dad's going to find me dead. And it might be in a week, because I'm used to being down this shed for months on end, and no one coming and checking on me, because they'd given up doing that. And it was a big wake-up call. And anyway, when maybe a year and a half into this, someone from the family, the step family, came to check up on me.
Is this like, what, like 2019, maybe? Or, yeah. Just for context, just for listeners, I guess.
Let's say sure, because honestly, for me, I can't make full sense of it. I need to,
okay.
you know, still these things are, I just haven't really worked through them chronologically. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, you know, some of the things you see in the Bible, they're not necessarily always in a chronological order. It's more like the whole from that time. That's kind of how I see it. From that time of my life, everything post-Christ, to me, I haven't really sat through and worked out chronologically.
It's quite an interesting, to me anyway, and quite a common phenomenon for, especially when people experience trauma, and obviously with you it's just wrapped up with all this kind of stuff, is your brain will, to save itself from the pain, make the memories ambiguous and messed up, and you just can't remember stuff from that time. I remember speaking with one of my best mates about a year ago on the podcast, Finn, and he very sadly lost his dad to suicide when he was 16. And he said to me on the podcast, 16, 17, 18, those years are almost a blur because your brain goes into autopilot.
Yeah, that's so true. Wow. Yeah, you're asleep at the wheel. You are sleepwalking through life because you can't face being conscious. So yeah, this happened, near-death experience, hand in hand with kind of a spiritual awakening of me going from, okay, there is more to life, I need to actually start thinking about this because I am clearly suppressing everything in me. And I lost the apprenticeship. And I went for another one. I got that one. That took me up to Birmingham. So I kind of naturally progressed, moved out of my dad's, had another apprenticeship where there was some time for me to go up to Wolverhampton University to do some studying, and that was as a structural engineer. And when I got up to Wolverhampton University, and I was on like the Dudley campus or something, I don't know, I was doing the same old whatever. I was fully funded in my crazy lifestyle.
Student finance.
Student finance.
Oh, the hedonism that can come from that if you don't have that structure.
It wasn't actually student finance. It was, here's some money from my boss as an apprentice. So I was being very well compensated while I was up in Wolverhampton, supposedly doing a university course in structural engineering, and in fact, I was up there rinsing the money I was receiving, making all kinds of contacts up in Birmingham, not for any long-term goal or purpose in trying to make money or whatever. It was purely, I'm fully living hedonistically now. I'm lost. I've tried to make a business out of selling drugs, and I've rinsed that up the walls using drugs. And now I'm in a similar position up in Wolverhampton, where I'm kind of trying to get on my feet by doing some petty selling and whatever, and that lasted for about a month, and I got a phone call from my boss, and they said you haven't been showing up for your lectures or for your courses or for any of you haven't handed any coursework or anything like that. And I don't think I was at the stage of coursework yet, but he was very upset at me on the phone. And he said, you're fired. And I'm there in somewhere I've never been before, in a very vulnerable place, really. And I'm like, I've messed up big time. I've done it again. I had the audacity as well to ask him for money to get me back. And I actually ended up reaching out to my dad. And
well, you couldn't afford like the train or anything?
No. I was absolutely rinsed. I think he pretty much called me the night after a major party, so and not showing up and whatever. So he was done with that. He's not investing in that. Unplug. And whatever responsibilities an employer has for an apprentice, I was over the age of 18 at that point. So it's like, see you. I call my dad, he sorts out a train, gets me back home, but he says, okay, we can't take you back. We don't want to see you homeless, but we can't take you back. And it's a little bit foggy, but I think after that, I ended up moving back in with my mum, who was still down here in Bournemouth, and she had a small place that she was renting from a friend that thankfully was more affordable and whatever, and it was a really horrible, dingy, damp apartment, grey, miserable place. And I was very unhappy there, and I remember using drugs there as well, and driving my mum up the wall with that, to the point where, again, she said, on my birthday, the night after a party, get your stuff together, you need to get out. My mum was never so strict as to say, or so heartless as to say, just get out. it broke her every time. And I remember on this occasion, I didn't actually get kicked out. I schmoozed, and I was very apologetic, and it was all very real. And I'm still very aware of my own, like, I'm an addict. I know I'm an addict. I can't help myself, but no one around me knows how to help me either. Interestingly enough, around this time, I was following a famous online yogic guru called Sadhguru. And I was doing mudras, mantras, chants, all these strange things. And one day, when I was listening to some of his talks, I decided to go downstairs for a cigarette. And I'm doing like yoga and trying to like attain spiritually, inner engineer myself for inner contentment and all these things. And I'm just smoking, I'm an addict still, I'm doing this thing part-time, just seeing if there's any truth to it, really. And I remember sitting down on the step of that apartment block and literally saying to Jesus, "Is it you?" I'm there, I'm going, "Is it you?" And I look up, and on the top of a house, there is an aerial in the shape of a cross. And immediately I cringe, and I'm like, no, not yet. Don't want anything to do with that yet. That looks like pain to me. All the spiritual stuff I was doing was very part-time, easy. It doesn't demand your life. It just demands, your interest. And out of all the spiritual pursuits, there is none that demands all of you.
Like it's for self rather than dying to self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for self. There are aspects of it that are there to help you love others and things like that. But and I do believe the Holy Spirit pours into some of that, but only where it is leading to Christ. So I schmoozed a little bit with my mother, and I managed to stay, and I tried to find a job. I'm bartending at the time. Tried to find a job that was had a live-in aspect to it. And again, I don't want to say too many names of places, but I got a job, and I went and became their live-in bartender. I'm still wrestling in a major way why it is I'm addicted to being escapism in every form, every single form it comes. And I was working, bartending, and paying stupid amounts of money to travel, I want to be careful here, but to travel where I was into Bournemouth. So I kind of was thinking about becoming the kind of guy out there. And that never really happened because I met a woman. Through this woman, I met a man. And this man was a very dangerous man. And this man wanted me to do some very dangerous things. And I didn't realize I was getting out of my depth very quickly. I was promised a certain amount of money. I was promised a certain amount of protection. And essentially, he wanted me to live between this place that I was living and Bournemouth Boscombe area. And he wanted me to be involved in selling heroin and crack cocaine. And probably other things as well. Just whatever, to have two home bases, a safe house and essentially a trap house, and we got quite involved in making a plan in that way. We went into a lot of different estate agents, me with this woman, posing just to gauge potential properties as a married couple. And things really became real to me when I heard a story that this guy had just gone to London with a Spetsnaz shotgun and robbed some coke dealers. And I'd had one run-in with the police with him involved, and I realized he was high profile. And I was like, okay, I need to snap out of it. I need to escape the place I'm in. I was fairly convinced if I had started earning money for him, That's not a situation I'd be allowed out of.
You might not be sat here alive today.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I could have got stabbed or shot, robbed, whatever. It could have been even worse than that. You know, you borrow money from the wrong people, they make an example of you. I've had things in the past where I've owed people money and I've been jumped in the streets and pulled into cars. And thankfully, on the occasion I was pulled into a car, you know, the guy actually left the door unlocked, pulled me in the car, left the door unlocked. He saw my rings and like some jewelry that starts to get snatched, and I just yank my hand, gun for the door. I'm like, you know, even the fact it was unlocked, I'm running with that, sure, I'm gone. Then we ended up having a massive fight on the side of the street and left me a fat, cracked cheekbone and black eye and all this stuff. And he ended up getting a nickname in Boscombe in some crowds of people, Tom with the black eye. Very strange, very basic nickname, right? But the guy wasn't English, and I guess that helped him cling on to this is Tom with the black eye, that's Tom with the whatever, right? And yeah, it was see you later, this area I'm living in. And I'm now in a position again where I'm without a place to live. And thankfully, I had made some connections in this time where I started to sofa surf. And once again, touching feet in Boscombe, the first thing that I really wanted to do when I got kind of my mojo back was start to feel out the scene in Boscombe and see what I could take advantage of and make money. Where's the motive? Where's the fun? There's the tattoo scene, it's pretty cool. I know a few people from there, and there's also there's like a group of Iranians I was introduced to, and they had a little mini operation where they were selling counterfeit tobacco, cocaine and weed.
It's crazy the stuff that, having lived in Bournemouth all my life, you just don't know about at all.
Yeah. Well, this stuff is actually being sold in corner shops left, right and centre.
But you need to know the right things to say.
You need to know the right things to say.
Yeah.
You need to not be someone who is going to, honestly...
Grass.
Yeah, but you don't know that when you're behind a counter selling it, especially when you've got people working for you selling it. So you really have to be like, you have to shadow people and be like, this person yes, this person yes, this person yes. That's your whole line. Don't sell to anyone else. Mm-hmm. Those people we can make enough money off that we can make money, right? And also there's some very obvious undercover police. Like it's just as some of them get it they do a really good job, and some people you see it a mile away, the way they hold themselves, the way they dress.
As in the police officer trying to act like he's buying drugs to see if they're selling drugs.
Yes. Yeah. Like the first things they might say when they come up to you is asking. I mean, the first that you don't, it is a whole picture of a person. And this is where actually stuff from my past was quite useful, because you look someone up and down, you let them do all the talking, and really you let them blow their own cover. Mm-hmm. And it's neither here or there, because you can't let them be sus that you're sus of them, because it gives them reason to be sus of you.
To be honest, that's almost good advice in general, without kind of overplaying that whole kind of dynamic between people and ego and status, because you don't want a stupid game.
Yeah.
But it's also helpful to not, when you're talking to someone, to let them say things and keep yourself quiet. Because then you can understand if there's ulterior motives at hand. You know what I mean? A fool can run his mouth.
Don't interrupt an enemy when he's in the process of destroying himself. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, there was an interview not long ago that I thought was hilarious about growing concrete. There's a guy who's in a sustainable business. Anyway, it's you don't interrupt your enemy when they're in the process of destroying themselves. You let them crack on. So I'm selling again in Boscombe. Mm-hmm. And I'm working under someone now. I'm not doing something myself. It's not as high profile as the Class A's like crack and heroin, where you will get robbed by the most random looking people. You put your life on the line every time you go out, because you are carrying something that people are willing to stab you for and take your life for. And I was quite cushy, because my job involved, and this is where I want to be very careful, because I have no idea what... My past is very well closed in Christ. And as far as the things I was involved with, I just really wonder if there's ongoing investigations into some things. And this is like a clue to some architecture in a building, I suppose. But I was on the top floor, and the guy who was selling, face-to-face, customer-facing, was on the bottom floor. And it was a shop, and there was a chute. So the whole operation, it was a factory. We didn't grow there. There's no way that would have worked. So we had a grow somewhere else in Boscombe, and then that came, fully dried up and whatever to us in big black bin bags, and then we would weigh it up, and then pop it down a chute. And we would have a walkie-talkie system where they would say, and again I won't say the words just for sake of whatever may be going on, but they'd say this or that, and we would deliver this or that. And it was a cushy life. We were upstairs, and I was with another believer, who I wasn't a believer at the time. He was a believer, and he was just really backslidden in a major way. We'd be up there, we'd be playing Worms, or we'd be playing City Skylines, or I don't know, some just whatever stoner games, while doing this job. Mm-hmm. And we're getting paid, and our smoke is paid for, and whatever. There were some other things as well that I didn't want to get involved in at all because of some other things in my past, but there was always a rotation of women with the guy I worked under, and that actually broke me a lot in my spirit, because I grew up in a household with my sister and my mother, and I have a lot of respect for women that clearly this man didn't, and I can recognize a broken woman when I see one, and that really did kill me. And the state of this guy, I felt so bad for them. Would
you say, in the same way you would use drugs, you would also use women? Was that the terminology that was, maybe not you, but was part of the ethic of the operation that was going on?
Yeah, women were a drug.
Yeah.
That's it. And to the extent that I took advantage of, or had taken advantage of women in the past, and the way I'd seen women that was basically fueled by pornography and film and music, it was all, they were objects. That's in my mind, it was that way. Now at this point in my life, my heart is definitely softened because of what I've gone through, and I do not see women the same way, and obviously my heart went out to them. Yeah. Not that I had any means of really helping them in that place. So anyway, I'm doing all this craziness. I end up in my third bout of homelessness, of which there was one afterwards, and this bout of homelessness, and this was street homelessness, I was put into, and I befriended a guy called Dean, and Dean is a very special friend of mine who was a believer and also kind of lived a similar party lifestyle. So I could relate to him and some of the things that he was doing. What I couldn't resonate with was his faith, and I was the guy full of arrogance and pride. I'm the spiritual guy. So when he talked about his faith, it frustrated me, and I also had something to prove about what I was doing, like why I'm doing meditation, why I'm doing these things.
Was there, drawing it back to the fact that you saw normal kids and there's like a slight bit of envy, was there a slight bit of envy towards he has this thing and he seems at peace with it, but I disagree with it, but also I'm slightly envious of it?
The thing I was envious most is that he believes he knows the truth.
Yeah, right.
And he isn't moving for the truth. No matter what I bring up to him, in all of my spiritual mumbo-jumbo nonsense, he is not shifting. He will not move for Jesus, and he will not move for the Word of God.
And that's frustrating, because it's like, I'm not standing on anything solid. I disagree with this person, but they're not moving, and that's frustrating because I wish I could do that.
Yeah, exactly. I wish that I had something solid enough. I wish I had a rock.
Right.
And he had the rock. I didn't have the rock.
So you spend a lot of time with him, talking with him,
I
and
spent
then
so much time with him. I must have interrogated him for about 6 months about his faith.
wow,
On the weekly meeting up, and we were smoking weed. It's something that I think he was just massively struggling with. He also struggled to articulate the gospel with me, but what he really did well was leave me wanting more, because I asked questions
from
all
his
the time.
character as well, right?
From his character, yeah. He had, like I say, he had what I didn't have, which was the truth. He also really was patient with me. He was so peaceable about our disagreements. He clearly, though he struggled to show it, he had love to give, and he had a story to tell as well about going from one kind of life to another. He has an incredible testimony about having a dream when he was in a coma of Jesus and being called to a different life. And I thought that was quite fascinating. He put a stone in my shoe, and I had to address it. I just had to take the shoe off and deal with this. So some months passed during lockdown. Before lockdown hits, while I'm in the shelter, I get out of the shelter right as lockdown hits. And it's my mum on the phone again, bless her heart. Do you want to come and live with me and my boyfriend? And I'm like, yes, please, take me out of this environment. Even in the shelter I was in, I had ended up selling drugs, selling Class A's, selling Class B's. So she invited me out of it, and I realized, again, I'm getting in too deep with some things. And I was still meeting up with Dean while he was in this shelter, and I ended up meeting a friend of his from California who had been pastoring him and helping him with some transitional things getting out of this shelter. He is the man who shared the gospel with me. And he is the person I met the love of Christ in. He's the person who met me on the weekly and would answer my questions, who really encouraged me to a higher calling, and who articulated the gospel in a really simple, effective way. One beautiful gift I'm so glad I have is that I am journaling all of this. I'm writing daily journals, so I have this all written down, the stuff that was going on. And it's beautiful looking back, because it goes from, I'm going to one of my exes, I just bought this, trying to sell that, I've got this debt, and some other bad things and whatever. And somewhere in there it says, I met Simon today, and he told me about this about Jesus and this about Jesus. And then somewhere else it says, Jesus is blowing my mind. And I can see the transition.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I can see my whole conversion written down. And there are gaps in it that are quite interesting as well. But I remember going away from one of my conversations with Simon, and I'm looking up at the sky and I'm thinking, can I be called a Christian? Can I be a Christian? I still really hadn't got it. And when I went home, I'm doing some research, I'm on YouTube, I'm looking at videos, and I find a preacher who's preaching just a few scriptures really about the names of Jesus. The names of Jesus. And the person who's preaching might be a controversial figure, so there's no need to mention his name, but what he was saying really pulled me in.
Hey, look, like, doesn't matter the person, not everyone's gonna
whatever, right?
Even a clock without batteries is right one time of the day.
There you go. So the scriptures that, alongside being shared the gospel and seeing the love of God in someone, a patience and just they invited me into their home. They did all these things. They really want me to change, but not because they hate me, hate how I am, because they love me. And the scriptures that blew my head off was the scripture where Jesus says that he is the way and the truth and the life, and that no one gets to Father God except through him. And the bigger one for me, in the place where I was in my life, which was essentially either I have no reason to live apart from all of my pleasures that make me want to kill myself. What does God have to say to someone like me in the place I am? And very simply, Hebrews 1, and how it was expounded to me, gave me revelation of who he was. And that's where everything starts to change.
What is that?
So Hebrews 1 is, in the past, God spoke to our forefathers through in various times, in various ways, but in these last days, God has chosen to speak to us through his Son, who is the glory, the radiance, the perfect imprint of him. He upholds everything by the power of his word. Not everything in there I understand now. The main message I understand there is, what does God have to say to me? Everything he has to say to me is in Jesus. The scriptures in Revelations that says, I am the Alpha and Omega, the one who is and was and is to come. I am the Lord God Almighty. I'm thinking those are not human words. There is something unbelievably weighty. He is He is everything God has to say to me. He is the beginning and the end of God's sentence to me as someone finding himself being. From a child, I'm alive, now what? And it flattened me in my bedroom. Absolutely flattened me. I gave everything that I could give all at once to him. And I could not wait to see Simon, because I couldn't wait to tell him I believed. And bless him, he's such a cool Californian dude. He was so like blasé about it. I remember meeting up with him on the promenade in Boscombe and kind of coming up beside him and being like, how you doing, Simon, how you doing? And he was like, I'm good, Tom, I'm good. You're well today? And I was like, I'm very well, man. Oh man, I want to tell you something. He was like, what are you going to tell me? And I was like, I believe. And he goes, oh, cool. What do you believe? I said, I believe in God. He said, cool. Who is God? And I went, I believe Jesus is God. And I don't even necessarily know what he said after that. That was my first confession of who I believed Jesus was. And something changed immediately. Mm-hmm. And he took me to a bench, he prayed for me. And he'd been telling me for the longest time, being a Christian won't make your life any easier. When you make this decision, it's not going to make your life easy. It's going to make your life hard, but it's going to fill your life with a purpose, and it's going to give you the strength to walk in all that meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. And I gave my life to Jesus. And, you know, times get tough and everything, but I would never give anything for the knowledge of him. Because when I look at my whole life, I see that he is the missing piece from beginning to end. He is why I'm here, and who am I? I'm his, and I'm loved, and that's a journey I'm still on, really. But I know where I came from, and I know where I'm going, and I have answers to questions that people spend their life through philosophy and sociology and all the sciences trying to figure out the meaning of life. And I carry his life. He has become one with me through his Spirit. I know I'm fully and truly loved, and nothing will separate me from him. And then other things from my past start to really explode with meaning. My dad was not there always for me, but even in the midst of my crime and my theft and my craziness, he said to me, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter who you become, you will always be my son. And it was like, whew, floods. You know, even saying that is very emotional for me, because where my dad fails, he excels somewhere else. And I'm so thankful to now be on this side of that life, on my best days, being a vision of hope for people who are still there. And I don't have all the answers, but I have the answer, which is a really strange thing to say, but there you have it. So, so that's my story so far, and I know God has so much more ahead of me now, and I don't know what that looks like, but after giving my life to him, I put an application in to join a church internship. I wasn't working in a job. I was still living with my mum and her boyfriend, and I thought I'm going to dive headfirst into what it means to be a Christian. Initially I wanted to tour the country, homeless, preaching, and he said, full of zeal, not full of wisdom, my friend, you know. He said, if God's calling you to do it, who am I to stop you? But just be careful. And it didn't happen. And I'm glad it didn't happen. That's for another time. But yeah, so on the flip side of all of that, through different church fellowships and landing at where I am right here, right now, which I find myself always being called into the present moment with God, which is one of the most amazing gifts as well, is just how you get a gentle nudge to breathe and be, and to remember Him, and that He's with me.
What would you say now to Tom from pre-lockdown Boscombe lifestyle? How would you reach him, and what's different?
It's funny because I have asked myself that question a lot. If I could meet myself in my lowest moments, what I would say to encourage myself are the words that He spoke to me in those moments. And the reason I recognize His voice in those moments is because I've come to learn what His voice sounds like now. In the midst of 1,000,001 voices in my own mind, living inside my own head, in a drug-fueled craziness of a lifestyle I used to live, there were so many voices. Just kill yourself, Tom. The amount of pain you cause in people's lives. There you go. You got a rope. You got a light fitting. Try something. Try to take your life. Were you a coward? 1,000,001 voices. And there's a voice that is so gentle, and I believe my God is light, He is life, and He is love. So the love in the voices of light that illuminated the voices of hate and gave me life, and they came from His love. I mean, it's so simple looking back. So the only thing I could have said, I don't know what I would have said. If I was to encourage someone in a similar position, the voices are now different, because I would have told myself about Jesus. And I think I have to recognize somewhere that if someone had told me about Jesus then, I wouldn't have received Him. But the Holy Spirit wasn't doing that. The Holy Spirit was doing something else. He was actually convicting me of sin and making me terrified of killing myself, because I believed hell existed and the devil was real and all those things. But you know, honestly, what I would have done is just put my arm around myself and promised myself, it gets better and you'll have answers one day.
Run our run last week. It gets better. We're just shouting to random kids as they're on their way to school. It gets better.
It gets better.
With no context. But you have no idea. It's comical to us. It's comical to think about. But actually, you have no idea. A kid hears that. It gets better. They laugh. What on earth is this person doing? They're in a broken family. They're really struggling.
Yeah.
They hear that. What
Yeah.
do they mean?
It's a voice of life. It is a voice of light and encouragement. And that's it. You know, it's quite comical. Like, we were running, I did a 5K, never ran a 5K in my life.
Do it
We're
again
running
tomorrow,
one tomorrow.
baby.
Come
Let's
on.
go.
And only with God's strength, because honestly, I have not trained all my life. My lungs, I cleaned out an EGR valve today, and the tar, I could string the tar like this between my fingers. And that is the state of my lungs for the last 10 years. So the fact I can do that, that proves so much of who God is. Like, He takes David, a shepherd, and turns him into a warrior king. For all of his faults and everything else, you know, we're told about the tender mercies of David, the witness, the testimony of that man's life, that doesn't matter who you are, God can make something out of your life. It doesn't matter what you've done, God's love never leaves you. And yeah, so I think to my younger self, it would be like the things that we shouted at children while we were jogging. It gets better, that God is real and he loves you, and that he has revealed himself to you in the person of Jesus Christ. And all you need to do is sit down in him with the full weight. I'm sat in this chair. Throw yourself at him. I don't know what I would have said at the time, but that wasn't God's approach to wooing me to love him.
I don't want to get too detailed on this, and obviously you can share or not share on this, but I also don't want to give people the false impression that the moment you are saved, everything becomes suddenly like you don't sin anymore, right? Because it's something that we all struggle with.
What are you talking about? I'm perfect. I'm absolutely perfect, man. I've never made a mistake since I met Jesus. No, absolutely. You can double down and make twice a cock up of your life.
Yeah. I'm just asking from the last 3 years. What have you journeyed in it? But obviously keeping it relatively brief.
I mean, honestly, the change I've seen in myself is insane.
Mm-hmm.
There are pictures I show of me, from 5 years ago, and the difference is night and day. I look like someone from Train Spotting, bags under my eyes, shaved head. I look dangerous, like you'd avoid me. And then over the period of the last 3 years, there's that thing that happens when you become a new believer and you receive grace. You start, well, for me personally, I went back to works immediately. I thought, how can I pay this off? How can I ever repay him? And I actually started to try. So it's an absolute journey. There are people who are terrified to make mistakes, and we shouldn't see sin as mistakes. But I think we need to see it in a kind of a light that is not so fearful. When it talks about that fear is not, God's love is not made perfect in someone who fears. What does it say? It says, for the love of God is not perfected in someone who fears, because fear is to do with punishment.
Yep.
Now, the weight of the punishment that Christ has accepted needs to land heavy in our hearts. In the same way, God clothes Adam and Eve in the garden so that they do not feel ashamed anymore. They do not feel guilty. I can wear him.
And it's the shame that keeps it suppressed or repressed. I don't know which word it makes more sense. It's the shame that keeps them back into the darkness, isn't it? It's
the truth. So at the very beginning of my walk, because there were certain teachings that were missing, it just wasn't the right time and place for me to learn these things, and God has a time to teach specific things he teaches. I didn't really have someone to speak to either about still slipping up with some really horrible, shameful things. I mean, after I've received him, the devil plays on that, because you start to think, I should know better, and I should be walking perfectly, and I should have all the power and all the knowledge. And I think it's a symptom of being in this part of the world. It's a symptom of, personally, my own pride and arrogance and all those things as well. But what is so important, I think, is to recognize when you become a Christian and when you know, there is a witness, there's an internal witness in the Spirit we're told about in the Bible. I couldn't tell you which book because I'm not a theologian or a scholar or any of that. I just know, as best I know, him from the life I received. There's an internal witness that tells me he is mine and I am his. And that's the moment you've, I think, become born again. And the shame and guilt that comes, the condemnation comes where we are ignorant. And if people perish for a lack of knowledge, as it says in the Word of God, of God's people, they perish for a lack of knowledge in the natural sense, just drinking from a poison well because you don't know it's a poison well, whatever. It's the same in a spiritual sense. You will perish in your faith for a lack of knowledge and understanding. And it's important, again, to stress that I now, and anyone who knows that they are God's child, can come to God in the fullest of confidence in what Jesus has done, no matter what disaster and mess you've made of your life, and receive the gospel again. Because we overcomplicate that. The love of God, the throne of grace, the fountain of outpoured love, lavished on us, once received, never passes. There's a scripture I love that says, if our hearts condemn us before God, God is greater than our hearts. And if our hearts don't condemn us, we have confidence in God. And I saw him on a cross. And not with a loincloth, not with a robe, naked, cold, nailed to a horrible cross. And that's where I should be. And I believe that happened. And I need to fully see the love of God in that horrible, horrible cross. And even more, he rose from the dead.
That's the gospel.
That's the gospel. We make mistakes. We're not perfect until one day. The most valuable thing in my life is my faith. That's it.
Just to kind of tie things up and draw things to a close, I suppose it's a fantastic testimony you shared, and I really appreciate the depth at which you were going through some of those things before, and I understand how difficult it is as well. Also working through things and piecing things in a way that's potentially new as well, in the way that you're trying to process in real time as we're recording this. So I massively appreciate your vulnerability and openness there. I just wanted to ask in terms of, I've known you for 4 months, maybe, probably less than that. And we've been living together for about 6 weeks in this house. Just to share the journey that God's currently got you on, and what your future may look like, although that's in God's hands. But just bringing it to where we are now, really.
So recently I've been brought into a community. I feel ever so slightly like Adam. I've been given a place to live, a job, and waiting on that other one still, right? A wife, but all in good time. I've been given these things, because what can I do? And God knows full well how much I rely on him. So I'm now part of a few businesses that are growing, and I'm wanting to get kind of invest in it in a I was kind of told this, you can have a donkey now, a racehorse later. And I've been used to getting donkeys all my life, so I want a racehorse now. I want something that's real, that's an investment that I could give potentially to people in need, or a family, if I ever have a family, children, if I ever, God willing, have children. I just want to now view life from a different lens, and God has given me a little bit now to be faithful with. So I want to be faithful with it. And between living here with you and our other Christian brothers, not to use too much Christianese, but honestly, we are a brotherhood in this home. And that's something that I think people don't know until they've got it, really. But we're all very serious and earnest here about what it looks like to follow Jesus, and not be a Christian, but to be a disciple of Jesus. And it's painful. It's full of so much pain and self-sacrifice and biting your tongue and doing that and making sure it's done in love, because it's very tricky. But I love them. Oh yeah, I love them. Okay, it's all kinds of whatever. So I'm sowing right now. I'm sowing, and sometimes in tears. But the Lord has a promise for those who sow in tears. They reap in joy. So
Good end it there. That's a great way to finish. Yeah.
It's a beautiful acronym, I think, joy.
Joy. What does it stand for?
Jesus first, others second, and yourself last. And you'll find joy, because you don't live for yourself.
Tom? This has been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this conversation. And I really do pray that people listening to this have been able to step in with your shoes somewhat as they've listened to this, and they've gone on the journey with us, and that now if they're not Christian, they're kind of spat out into the other side of questions.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage anyone who's watching this to get in touch. And if you're local, if you're in Bournemouth, I'd love to meet up. I'd love to have a coffee. If you're not local, but you're keen to chat, then let's organise something. Let's do something. The podcast is back. It's back with a bang, and it's back with a Bryant.
It's back with a Bryant.
Surname.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and stay tuned for the next few weeks because we've got lots more in store, exciting to come. Cheers.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Extrospective podcast with me, your host Tom Bryant, and today we have on Zach Vilnell Snell. We're missing so much gold here. I don't know what you made.
I don't know why I just left that on you as well. I could just take it off. I couldn't do anything about it.
Well done to be quick on the trigger there with the camera. I don't think you got it, but
this
is it broken?
No, but there's
Oh,
there's a bit of a puddle now.
Well, I've never been to such a disastrous, unprofessional interview. Where's my manager?